Hi, good evening. We're going to get started here. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Greg Richards. I have been a Shrewsbury resident for about 12 years. How many people do we have here from Shrewsbury? Ooh, wow, most. What other towns? Just popcorn. I know we got Sutton, Millbury, Worcester, Marlborough. Excellent. And we have some guests here tonight, which I will introduce. But we do have 2 hours tonight. We do have a hard stop at 8:45. I'm hoping there's a lot of good questions, a lot of debate, but the library does close at 9, so we want to make sure we're respectful. And we do finish on time and get out of here. I decided to get involved tonight. I attended a planning board meeting specifically to address the warrant related to the MBTA Communities Act. And when I went up and I presented to the planning board, I thought I was making some very good arguments, but the response from our planning board was, well, that's just how the sausage is made. And I thought to myself when I left, I said, I'm not really happy with that response. And I actually said, that isn't how the sausage is made. This is how the sausage is made when you get members of the community together to discuss what's important to us, right? Our opinions are what's important. Our elected officials work for us, not the other way around. And as I was out talking to people about this Communities Act, there's several questions that they would always ask, thinking, what is really about this? What does this really mean? What's it about? How is it going to impact me? And other people would say, well, I thought it's just zoning, right? What's the big deal? So we'll address all of those things tonight, but I have my own questions, what are the true intentions of this act? Why does it exist? Who's involved with implementing it and why? And, has our town of Shrewsbury done its due diligence, prior to creating and presenting the article to town meeting for approval? So that's what we really want to talk about tonight. So at the end of our discussion, you're going to be in one of two places, right? You're either going to think, I'm in support of this, and that's okay, right? This is a nonpartisan discussion. This is about community getting together about what's important to us. You may also say after tonight, this isn't something I support, and I don't think we should support it as a town. As Americans, we are entitled to our opinions, and we're allowed to disagree, and that's okay. Tonight's forum is really designed, to allow open civil debate from both sides, and everyone here is welcome to share their ideas. We do have some guests here tonight I want to introduce, and I'm going to introduce Clayton Sauvé, who's the chairman of the Cape Ann Political Action Committee. Clayton.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MBTA Multifamily Zoning Facts and Myths meeting. My name is Clayton Sauvé, and I'm the chairman of the Cape Ann Political Action Committee. I'd like to say a little bit about the numbers on this MBTA mandate as I see them before we get to our speakers. In 2020, Massachusetts had 1.9 million housing units. The state is now attempting to mandate nearly 300,000 more new units on the targeted communities. If all those units are built, proportionately, that would be a 15% increase in Massachusetts' population. With a population now of 7 million people, that's over 1 million more people jammed into the state of Massachusetts. Who is going to pay to educate the children, build the new schools, the infrastructure, the hospitals, and social services this massive influx is going to require? In Gloucester, the state is mandating a minimum of nearly 2,300 units. If the 2,300 new units average one school-age child per unit, that will nearly double the number of school tuitions Gloucester taxpayers will be charged for, meaning the school budget will go from $50 million a year to $100 million a year. Since the new units will only bring in about $10 million in new taxes every year, Gloucester taxpayers will need to come up with another $40 million every year to cover the difference in perpetuity. And that doesn't even take into account the cost of all the new schools that will need to be built. Statewide, will the influx of hundreds of thousands of new low-wage workers break the labor markets our young entry-level workers depend on to establish themselves in the workplace? I see no indication that the state government, already over $1 billion in the hole this fiscal year, is going to provide any funding for any other relief for taxpayers for any of this. Why is the state attempting to do this? Where are all these new people going to come from? Who is going to employ them? There certainly are a lot of unanswered questions. Hopefully tonight we can find some answers. Thank you all for coming, and please welcome our next speaker, John Kolakowski.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for welcoming us here and giving us an opportunity to give our presentation. We've done a presentation, something like this. We try to cater it a little bit to the given town that we're presenting this. In Rockport, Gloucester, Manchester, Boxford, Winthrop, Raleigh, Wakefield, and now Shrewsbury. And probably sometime next week or the week after, we're going to do Rentham as well. And you may ask, why did we do this, or why did we bother to go give presentations? None of us are paid. We're just citizens like Craig here. We're concerned about what's going on, and we looked at our own town, and we had a lot of questions. We were concerned about this mandate, how this mandate, if we followed the mandate, what it was going to do to our town. We wanted to know answers, and we really weren't getting answers. We were getting ideas of this zone and that zone. We're going to be so close to the railroad station. It was an important thing to be close to this railroad station. And then it seemed to not matter as much. You could have a zone somewhere else. But anyway, the questions kept coming, and we didn't have answers. And frankly, I believe the planning board and your other government officials should be providing you answers. I think that's part of their function. If they are concerned about the citizens, they want to give them as much facts and figures so they can make intelligent decisions about what the town will be like in the future. Now, I'm not saying all town officials are that way. I'm sure there's exceptions. But we found that a lot of, especially planning board members, sort of are marketing what the state would like to do and not really what the town would like to do, what the citizens would like to do. There's a lot of facts out there that people just aren't aware of. For instance, how many know about home rule? Anyone heard of a home rule? Okay, may I ask, where did you learn about home rule?
After Greg's presentation, then I
Okay,
researched it.
okay, all right.
Amendment to the Constitution.
All right. So I would think the town officials would bring this up because this is a law that's contradictory to this very 3A situation, this mandate. But most of the town officials don't bring this up, okay? Now, the other thing is they talk about grants. Now, Craig did some research on grants. In most cities, the grants that they talk about are relatively small. There's 4 grants. And there's even now they're trying to expand the number of grants. And technically, we don't believe that's legally feasible or legally allowed. And sometimes they're even alluding to the fact that the grants for schools and highways would be affected too. Again, would not be part of this at all. So, but anyway, they're talking about these grants. Many towns, people don't know what the grants are even. And if you try to find out, it's very difficult to find out. And generally, it's very small in relationship to the overall budget. Not all towns, but most towns we find very small. And probably even, I know it's a little bit more here, but even in relationship to the total budget, it's probably relatively small too. But anyway, there's things they could do, and they could simply provide you with information. Now, you know, what's the number of units here again?
15,000, so 1,500.
1,500, okay. So 1,500 units. Now, with all our town monies and town expertise, I'm sure the school does budgets every year. They could give you a rough idea of how that would affect their budget, having that many units. They're supposed to be family-friendly units, and family-friendly, you could say maybe one school-age child per family, per unit rather. And even if you underestimate that to maybe 0.8 children, it's still a phenomenal number. So I think the schools could provide that number if they were directed by the town administration. Same thing with the sewers. Do you have sewers here? Okay. Is it throughout the city or certain areas? Okay. Again, they know how that would impact the cost of your town, but did any of this information come to you? Or did you maybe looked, investigated it and found out certain things, but these numbers are readily generated by a town. If they want to give it to you, they could easily give it to you. They don't even have to be that accurate. If they're plus or minus 20% of accuracy, you're going to get a good idea of how much cost it's going to be. For instance, Boxford did a rough calculation just looking at the schools, and they virtually got nothing. I think it's like 25,000 or something from these grants, and just on the schools alone, it would have added like $5 million at cost per year. The Hamilton did similar, same situation. I think it might have even been more. Okay, but these are numbers that your town officials, I would ask them to furnish them. I mean, it's within their control, and that's the whole thing. I don't think we're getting a complete story of what these mandates are going to do to you, what your taxes are going to result in, and what's going to happen. And they have the tools right now to give you an idea. So to me, it's really a pity. The police department could tell you how it's going to impact them. The fire department could tell you. Do they now need special equipment, special trucks, which are not cheap? Who knows? But I'm not in a position to judge, but they are. Okay? And if you don't get them to work for you, why should you even support any issue that they want to put through? It just seems like it's just normal required duties of your political offices, So anyway, you have the sewage. You may have to expand your water lines, your sewer lines, your wastewater treatment plant may have to be bigger. All these things should be taken into account, at least known beforehand, so you can make it a good decision on whether you want to go with this mandate or not. And I'm not saying you should or not, but I think you should have the facts as best you can so you could judge for yourself on whether you're going to support it or not. I would expect any responsible town government official to be thinking along this line. Okay? I just think it's common sense, and I think it's part of the job. Okay? Before I just open up any questions, I just want to mention a few things that I think you should think about also while the presentation is going on, perhaps. I don't know if we really have a housing shortage. I know we have a shortage of affordable housing, but I don't know if we really actually have a housing shortage. Okay, the biggest complaint most people have is affordable housing, right? I mean, everyone's saying, I can't afford this, I can't afford that, it's too pricey, the rents are too high, or whatever. And this bill doesn't even cover affordable housing. It did at one time, but they took that out. So this bill doesn't even cover that. So you should wonder what's the purpose of it, okay? The real bottom line is, does Shrewsbury want to give up their rights to control their own zoning in their own town to some bureaucrat in Boston? Really, that's what it boils down to. You're giving up any kind of control, and actually you're giving up your sense of community too then when you give up your control, zoning control in your own town. So you got to think about whether that is something you want to live with? Because it's hard enough to get something done in your own town. Just think how you would have to do it to get it done if you have to go through the state, right? And once these zones are put in place, the bottom line is you have no control. They could change them at will. They've already done a lot of changes with the law. I mean, they fabricated basically the whole law when you come down to it. There's 3 paragraphs, right? And it sounds sort of nice, the law, on the surface, but what they put into it already is really damaging to any community that accepts it. Of course, I'm biased. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't, but I think the facts will speak for themselves if you find the facts, or if you're able to get the town officials to help provide some of the facts, or do the research like Craig's done in many cases, doing the research to get the information that could be provided to you guys. Because of the other thing they stress is that, we need these housing developments, and so people will stay here and all that. I think Massachusetts' high taxes, the shrinking manufacturing and job opportunities, the intrusive government regulation, the anti-small business policies are the motivating factor for people who work for a living and pay taxes why they're probably moving out of the state, similar to in California. Difficult to get these numbers because we had a declining population from 2020 to 2022, I believe it was. But there's also a way they count is hard to extract this information. As you know, the census now counts everybody. You don't have to be a citizen to be a number now. And so it's difficult, but I contend that you have a big percentage of the people moving out of the state because of those problems that the state has created. And even if I'm only partially right, these people are leaving the state and they're no longer taxpayers and they're no longer supporting the state. And it's damaging the education standards of the state. Simple as that. As I believe Clayton mentioned, there's $1 billion shortfall right now with the government, in the state government. And it's probably going to be a lot more. We don't even know the extent of the government, that they're only admitting to $1 billion right now. I don't think they're going to provide much money for grants in the future anyway. So that threat to give up your grants, or so that if you give up your grants, you can't, how should I put it? Well, bottom line is, you could be giving up your grants for nothing. You may not get anything in return for doing that, except a controlled zone by the state of Massachusetts. Anyway, there's a lot of questions I think you should be asking. And I think the best thing, we're going to go, probably, the whole intent of this meeting primarily is to bring out the legal aspects of this, your options, what the law states, what's true about the law, what's not true about the law. And if you like it, you could go along with the state mandate. If you don't like it, what's the options that you may have, okay? And I'm going to turn this over to Craig right now.
Yeah, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now I'm going to try to make legal stuff as fun as possible because everybody loves reading statutes and text. So get introductions. I'm going to go and I'm going to do an overview of the act. I am going to read the act. I think it's important to look at the words. I think words matter very much so. Then Attorney Walsh is going to help out with the legal update. And then we are going to come back and focus specifically on what is Shrewsbury proposing, all right? I'm going to make no assumptions that anybody in this room knows anything about 3A, so I apologize if you already are an expert, but I think it's important just to make sure everybody's on a level playing field, as well as what is Shrewsbury planning, what does that zone look like, and what the impact could be. So with that, an overview. So this is the actual full text, updated and amended as it exists. It's 3 paragraphs. Essentially, it says, what is it? What are the penalties if you don't comply? And who's responsible for effectively creating guidelines, or it's a little bit more structure as to how this law is implemented. So if you read it at the top, all right, it is, I'll read it. I might skip a few words, but it states that an MBTA community, okay, I'll stop there. So the MBTA communities are defined, I believe, in General Law 161, and it actually lists what towns are considered rapid transit communities, which there was 12. And then it has who's commuter rail communities, there's adjacent communities, which Shrewsbury is adjacent, and then there's small town adjacent communities such as Sutton. Those definitions they're listed by town in 161. So that's where that comes from. So some people say, well, we don't have an MBTA community stop. We don't have a stop. We have nothing MBTA. Well, we are defined as an adjacent community because we touch a community that has the service, okay? So that's how that comes from. So as such, we have to create a bylaw. We have to create one district of reasonable size that has multifamily housing permitted as of right. We'll talk a little bit more as to what as of right means. That's a very important word and a very important term. You know, it says provided, however, there shall be no age restrictions. So that means you cannot have just senior housing. You can't say this is senior housing. It has to be for all ages. So children, you know, everybody has to be included. All right. And you have to have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. So that just means that in an acre of land, you have to support at least 15 housing units in that space. That's the requirements. The other piece of this, which doesn't apply to Shrewsbury, is that this zone should not be located more than a half a mile from a commuter rail station, subway, ferry terminal, bus station, if applicable. So it's not applicable to us because we don't have it, so we can put that zone anywhere. So once again, I always try to look the common sense lens in my brain that says, if it's about transit and related to the MBTA, and it doesn't have to be anywhere near an MBTA station, how is that related to transit? That's just an observation. So after that, so like I said, reasonable size, right? So the term reasonable is important. I think you can use our lens in your mind of what you deem reasonable, and we'll show you what that looks like. 15 units per acre, all ages, half a mile, if applicable. If you don't do it, second paragraph, it says if you fail to comply, you shall not be eligible from funds from, and then there's 4 types of grants listed: housing choice, capital funds project, mass works infrastructure, housing works. And we're going to talk about that. Brian is going to talk specifically about what Shrewsbury has received in probably the last 7 years. What were they used for? We'll talk very specific about Shrewsbury a little bit later on. So that's essentially it. You create a zone. If you don't, you're not eligible for grants. And the last piece, it identifies what they call the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but they are going to promulgate guidelines to determine if a community is in compliance, right? So they're making that determination. So we'll get into a little bit more about them in a minute. But first, as of right zoning. So zoning as of right means that, for this case, the district can proceed without discretionary processes such as special permits, variance, zoning amendments, and other approvals. So one thing as of note, right, because I did attend the planning board, this is my example. There are some warehouses that they're proposing to build up on the north side of town. So those of you in Shrewsbury might be familiar. It's 2 separate warehouses, about 1 million square feet combined. And that community has some concerns over putting that there, right? There's public hearings involved with that. There's a big, long process with that. As of right zoning, as if you look at the second paragraph, this is their terms saying that in many cities, when multifamily housing is allowed, it's subject to this expensive, unpredictable, and time-consuming process, and permits that are discretionary can also result in multiple public hearings, which causes additional with and projects and yada yada. Well, I think it's kind of important that we have public hearings if the public wants to express their concerns, but with as of right zoning, as long as the project you're proposing meets building standards. There is a plan review, so you can review it as a town to make sure it meets certain standards. But if that plan, and if I'm wrong here, chime in, if that plan meets all those conditions, you cannot deny it because it's as of right zoning. So if you want to put a multifamily unit in a multifamily zone part of this overlay district, you can build it as long as it meets basic building requirements. So it takes away a lot of the ability of the town to reject developers' plans. And I think we'll get into a little bit later, there's actually some specific language within the guidelines, which we'll talk about, that allows the state, if they believe that you are using too harsh of a review on people's plans, that they can actually pull you out of compliance because they don't believe you're approving enough plans or you're not following the as of right. Yeah, this is it here. So essentially the EOHLC, that's that Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, essentially can say they can rescind our compliance if they believe that the board that issues permits, fails to act to allow for a project to move forward. So there's a lot of requirements in here and there's a lot of observation that's going to be going on that's not going to allow the towns to scrutinize what gets built. So we'll keep moving on here. So I think it's important to understand who the EOHLC is, and this kind of goes back to a question I had at the beginning. I think a lot of people mention that this is just zoning, there's no mandate to build. Well, it did not say in there that we have to build anything. I'm just going to lay out my case to show you why I don't necessarily believe that that's 100% true. On the website for the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, it clearly states that it was established in 2023 to create more homes. Not to create zoning, it says to create more homes. And it also distributes funding and oversees state aid for the public housing portfolio. In Shrewsbury, if you're familiar with this project, this is being built on Route 20. I think they changed the name, so it's called Emerald, I think now, but it's the Point at Hills Farm. It's on Route 20 across from the old, I think it was a Polynesian restaurant. It's before my time that it was ever open. But it's good to know it's 93 housing units, and there was $42.1 million for that development is state aid. Divided $28 million in tax credits for because it is a 40B as well, so there's some low-income housing tax credits allocated by the EOHLC. They also provided direct support, which is cash, and $7 million in the American Rescue Plan Act funding, along with some additional financing through this mass housing on behalf of the EOHLC. So I'll just pause for a second. So the agency that's responsible for creating guidelines for zoning is also the agency that's responsible for allocating funds to developers to build. But it's just zoning. Okay, it's just zoning.
Questions?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much did the contractor actually put in?
Actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and I do try to put my sources up here. I'm just because I like to be comprehensive. So this is mass housing. A lot of these, this is all material that you can Google and find up there. So just to be clear that is what that agency is also charged with doing. So in these guidelines, what did they create? Important to note. So their definition of reasonableness, I should say. So we talked about the 40 units per acre. So and how they're going to promulgate this. So the guidelines and the paragraph of reasonableness translates to 18 pages of guidelines. 18. So we went from one paragraph to 18 pages, which we revised 3 times already. Okay? Just to be clear. So what they've included is 2 things. We mentioned earlier, John I think mentioned it, or Clayton I maybe mentioned it. There's no affordability in this standard, in the section 3A. It does not include any express requirement for affordability. So we talked about a concern for affordable housing. No requirements in 3A that it be affordable housing at all. As a matter of fact, I believe you're actually limited to 10% of 40B guidelines. You can't actually go above that without special approval. Is that, so it's, even if you wanted to say, no, we're going to do a much higher percentage of affordability, you're not allowed to under this 3A. Number two, the land area, the minimum land area, they defined it as being 50 acres or 1.5% of the developable land in an MBTA community, whichever is less. So we'll show you later, Shrewsbury is 173 acres. That's the size of the plan we had chosen. But it has to be a minimum of 50. And the other part here, which is, I think, pretty interesting, is the minimum capacity. So it's based on the type of community. I talked earlier about classifications. Just for simplicity's sake, Shrewsbury, it being an adjacent community, is 10%. So we have a total housing of approximately 15,000 housing units. It's just under the number. So we have to support 1,500 new units in this zone. So we have to add 10% of our population or be able to build housing units that support a 10% increase in our population within this zone. That's the requirement. So I always kind of say, this is my analogy, but a reasonable person, it always says, if we're going to go out to dinner, and I said we're going to have a reasonable dinner, I think you have a number in your mind. If I said, by the way, I'm going to ask for 10% of your net worth as for my dinner, I don't know if we're aligned on the definition of reasonableness. Where in this standard it says, and that's just 10%. If I was, Milton, who was defined as a rapid transit community, right, wrong, or indifferent, 25% increase, it could be much higher as far as what you need to support for additional housing. So the last piece I'll touch upon was the penalty phase on the grants. So in the guidelines, we had talked about, in the statute it says there's 4 grants. In the guidelines, they said, oh, by the way, we're going to throw 13 more grants in here just in case. Now, I think they get away with it because if you look at the language, it doesn't say that you're ineligible. It says, well, we're going to take compliance in consideration when issuing grants, right? Which means you won't qualify. But we're not expressly saying that you can't have the grant. So it is a way to put a lot more pressure on the towns to move forward with this, right? So that's what those guidelines say. So this just to go backwards a second. 3 paragraphs, now we're 18 pages with a whole bunch of other requirements that we must or shall, let's say, implement as a town. So with that, I think I'm going to bring up Attorney Walsh, who's going to talk a lot more about the law and answer a lot of the legal questions that you may have now. So thank you, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Walsh. I'm an attorney. I practice out of a small family firm in Lynnfield, Mass. That's in Essex County, for those of you who are this way in Central Mass. My friend Ryan Fatman tells me that I can't refer to this as Western Mass, so I promise. I swear that I rode the Pony Express, and there were all kinds of bandits along the way out here. I represent John Kolkowski, who is that very strange, bald gentleman in the really awful Hawaiian shirt. One of his prior, I made a joke about Hawaiian shirt. Now he deliberately wears it to every one of these events. So I represent him. We have a lawsuit on behalf of 10 citizens of the town of Rockport. We're alleging that this law is unconstitutional under the state constitution. For those of you who know what home rule is, in 1966, the voters amended the state constitution to bring out Article 89, which establishes the right to local self-government. Among other, a lot of it's minutiae that you will never care about. It deals with your form of local government, whether you want to have an open town meeting or a limited town meeting. But some of it deals with your right as your local town to enact the kinds of bylaws to determine what kind of conduct is good or suitable for the public health, welfare, and morals. And that is a purely local power. Article 89 is deliberately designed to guarantee local cities and towns the right to pass laws for their own welfare. If you want to be a progressive community like Brookline and you want to stop having plastic bags, shopping bags in grocery stores, you can do that. God bless you. I don't want to live there, but if that's what you want to do, you can do that. Because you have an independent corporate existence. You have a right to choose the kind of town you want to live in. If you want to be a big port city like Gloucester, or a tiny little bedroom community like Lynnfield, or a sleepy little hollow like Sutton, or if you want to build be an up-and-coming tech corridor like Peabody, that's your right and privilege. You can adopt policies that help advance your aims. And zoning is one of the best, most effective ways of articulating how we determine what our communities look like. The cases from the 1970s, including a case out of Arlington and one out of against the Zoning Board of Appeals of the town of Hanover, expressly confirm that Section 6 of Article 89 confers to the cities and towns the independent right to have zoning how they like it. So there are now, constitutionally speaking, two sources of zoning power. One is whatever is delegated to you from the state, and then the second is your own. Going back to those 3 paragraphs Craig got up earlier, what it says is that you, the towns, shall draw. It is trying to compel you to enact local bylaws on your own authority that match or mirror a state-chosen policy. We think this violates Article 89, both in spirit and in the letter. The Attorney General is fighting a little hard against it, and then I'll get back to more of that in a minute, I promise. I'll go really quick. Normally, I'm a small part of a larger presentation, but you've got a lot of local concerns here, and I don't want to take away from the local stuff.
If you want Mike to speak a little slower.
Oh, the court reporters hate me, you wouldn't believe it. We're also attacking the law because, well, the law was initially enacted in 2021. It was 3 paragraphs buried in the middle of a 192-page bill. It isn't quite the 3,000 pages they were talking in the very heated debate in Milton, but it was still a significant bill, and it was an economic development bill. It was a bill that had billions of dollars for across a decade or so for borrowing for important government priorities, for social services, and for all kinds of pro-business policies. And so if you were the governor and you missed these 3 paragraphs, I don't know that anyone could blame you, but whatever it is. When it was initially sold to the legislature, this was initially sold as an affordable housing law. It is now no longer an affordable housing law. I know Craig cites to 18 pages worth of guidelines. The revision that I studied the most has 40 pages. And boy, however, are they a monstrosity. But let me tell you, one of the other arguments we're making is that normally speaking, when we talk about laws, you think of a law as something passed by 2 houses of the legislature and signed by the governor or the president, depending whether you're talking federal or state. We also have regulations. Regulations are any kind of rule, regulation, rate, policy, procedure that affects private rights. And in this state, in order to have a valid regulation, you have to go through the Administrative Procedures Act. You have to subject your regulation to public comment, notice in a hearing, and then you have to take the hearing that you get. And you have to explain why, if you don't do what the public said to do at the hearing, you have to explain why you reject it. And that is subject to review by a judge. So it can take some time. I mean, theoretically, the agencies can wave their magic wand once they jump through all the hoops and change the rules, but they still have to subject their rules to comment. They still have to allow public input. And if they're going to blow you off, they have to tell you to your face that they're going to do it. In this law, this 3-paragraph law, they chose to use the term guidelines, and there is a very open question of law, but the Housing Department, part of the reason we know this is because of a memorandum that was written by Attorney Whiteside, who before he died was the former general counsel of the State Housing Department and also the chairman of the planning board in Milton, and he was helping those folks fight their battle. They're using guidelines partly because they're afraid of public scrutiny and subjecting their rules and edicts to a public process, but part of it also is that they want to reserve the right to change their mind without having to go to the public and explain. The very first version of these guidelines did in fact have an affordability component, but a lot of developers went to the housing department and said that if you make it too affordable, then we're not going to be able to make money off of it. So eventually they abandoned the affordability component in favor of just a straight line on pro-development. Now, as Craig said, if you're allowed to have an affordability restriction in your compliant district up to 10%. If you want to go above that, you have to pay a pre-selected state consultant to do an economic feasibility study to make sure that if you go up to 20%, that it's not going to impact the ability of developers to make housing. This law is no longer, if it ever was, about affordability. This is just about development. I've been known to call this a developer's breakfast, and I apologize as a lawyer and a litigator. I am very much a partisan, so take it for what it's worth. In terms of the guidelines, one of the other interesting facets in it is that we talk about the percentages you have to have the developable acres. But you never saw that in the law passed by the legislature. One of the members of our little group went and talked to her local legislator, and he said, "Oh, I voted for an affordable housing. I voted for an affordable housing law in the middle of a big economic development bill. Who wouldn't vote yes?" The minutia, of course, is always in the details, and that's where it kills the proposal. And it's all subject to change anytime the state housing department wants to. But the guidelines as presently constructed are essentially just about creating housing. There are essentially 2 metrics. One is an area requirement. You must, based on the size of the town and a certain number of local areas, your city or town must have a certain number of acres that are available for high density. And then there's also, you must allow for the creation of so many new units. And you can actually average them across, and there's also a very complex formula that allows you to exclude things like college land and municipal land. I was talking to a gentleman in Manchester, and he thought, great, don't worry about the law, we'll draw the zone over the town dump and the cemetery. Brilliant idea. However, the folks in Boston are not stupid. They've seen this game before, and so in one of the newer revisions, there's this excluded land component. And they'll lower the number of acres that you have to dedicate in your zone, but in exchange, you can't just site it over places that would make it economically infeasible. They do not want to allow cities and towns to defeat the objectives that they're pushing. One of the other things that we're attacking in the lawsuit is that when they amended the law, they also amended the Section 5 of the Zoning Act. Section 5 of Chapter 48 determines the process by which we adopt zoning laws. It doesn't tell you what you have to zone or why you have to zone it. It just tells you that a uniform process so that when I'm a builder in Shrewsbury and I go across the line to Sutton, if I got to rezone my parcel, I know the same process. There's a planning board, there's a hearing, and then you go to town meeting. Normally speaking, for a change in zoning, either adoption, amendment, or deletion, you have to have a 2/3 majority at the local legislative assembly, which in your case may be an open town meeting or a representative town meeting. For one of the governor's 4 chosen priorities, we have lowered that to a simple majority. Because invariably, if you don't like the results that you're getting, you change the process to make the results easier. Now, I should tell you that this change to a simple majority is one way. It's only to opt into the program. It's not to change it, it's not to opt out of it, it's only to opt in. This is a one-sided shift in the rule, and it is not even-handed. And because it deals with the structure by which the towns adopt their own local rules, we're also arguing that this violates the Home Rule Amendment. The 4 priorities of the governor that are presently changed to a simple majority are Chapter 40A, Section 3A, the MBTA housing, affordable, I believe it's the adoption of a starter home district under 40R, and then I believe it's also the adoption of accessory dwelling units as a right. You may see that also is in the governor's forthcoming housing bond bill. It's one of her new signature acts. And then there's a 4th one, which I don't remember, and I'm really sorry about that. It's minutiae, you won't care about it. You can look at it in Chapter 40A, Section 5. On the other hand, they were concerned that your local legislative assembly may not be representative if you're from anything like a town council or a city. So they created a process where if you get half of the landowners in one of the affected districts to sign a petition that objects to the district, you can bump the threshold back up to 2/3. This doesn't have a lot of purchase in towns, but I've been trying to recommend it wherever I go. When I ran the numbers in Gloucester about a year ago, it actually 2/3 was going to make the difference between the life and death of one of these things, and all of a sudden it pulled back. In terms of the law,
You may want to see if anybody has questions at this point, too.
anybody have questions? Okay, doing all right. Or at least I haven't talked. Yes, sir.
So, I'm trying to figure out what the objective is, of the state. So, is the objective to override whatever the town wants to have done if the town is against this? Because in the paragraphs up there, it sounds like there's a lot of override language that they can do whatever they wish. And the second thing is, there are already 500 units scheduled to be built in Shrewsbury. Are those also
Outside.
part of this versus outside?
Outside.
This is outside of that, and it's a very intelligent question. I'll explain it, but let me answer the first question first. So, when I'm explaining this in the 5-minute elevator speech, I say that if you're a city or town that's served by mass transit, boat, bus, rail, or subway, or you're a town next to a town served by mass transit, you have to have one of these districts. The districts, it's essentially designed to promote housing. They just found the towns an inconvenient obstacle. In terms of, which is resulting in a massive political and constitutional power struggle at the moment. But in terms of where it came from, are any of you familiar with Complete Streets? Complete Streets is a nationally syndicated grant program that is also present here in the state. It's administered by the State Housing Department. And they created the ideal street. Imagine a big European boulevard with multiple lanes of traffic and big broad sidewalks, speed control devices and bike lanes and trees and all kinds of other great stuff. And they, ADA compliant sidewalks, beautiful pedestrian stoplights. And they said, we will grant any city or town money for any step towards that ideal. crooked New England, small, tiny streets, anything that makes them better, we'll shovel money towards. And it's a great idea. The next step from complete streets was a program that the State Housing Department developed in coordination with the federal HUD department, which is the idea that we should have 15-minute walkable neighborhoods. If you think about downtown Manhattan or the Bronx, I should be able to walk anywhere I need to go and hop on the subway and go anywhere in the world. I should be able to stop at a corner bodega and get whatever I need, and I should be able to walk anywhere in the world within half a mile. That's actually where that half-mile number comes from, is the idea that there should be this 15-minute walkable neighborhood. It has been kicked around in some of the academic journals for the better part of 10 years, but eventually it found purchase in the legislature. In terms of whether or not it's a good idea, I mean, let's suppose you were the folks out in Holden. Holden has a really small downtown. It doesn't even really have much of a downtown, and there's one train, and it goes essentially to one place in Boston. And if any of you would like to do your weekly shopping on the commuter line, God bless, but it wasn't for me. I gave this lecture at Boxford, and it was funny. We drove into town, and there was one building across from the church, and this one building is the bank, the store, and the post office, and that's the downtown Boxford. And God bless anyone who wants to do walkable shopping in Boxford. It really just is a farm town. And so a lot of cities and towns are subject to this. There are 177. Were initially opposed to this. As a matter of fact, the lobbying organization for municipal officials, the Massachusetts Municipal Association, when this law came up, they wrote a letter to the Governor Baker and they said, please veto this, it's going to override local decision making. It's a one-size-fits-all formula, it's clumsy and it's awkward. The governor didn't do it. And now lots of cities and towns and local officials feel pressed into doing this. They say it's the law, they say they have to do it. And the short answer is that we're not really sure that that's true. For those of you who saw the list of the 13 grants, one of the things we're challenging is the idea of when lawyers interpret documents, we use a series of rules called the canons for statutory construction. They help us determine what words mean and what applies and whatnot. One of the most famous ones, and forgive me, my Latin is terrible, but it goes something to the effect of expressio unis alteris exclusus. The expression of one thing is the exclusion of all others. If I'm the legislature and I go to the trouble of saying that if you don't comply, you're not eligible for 4 grants, only 4 grants, and that's the only penalty, what business is it of any other branch of the government to override your elected representatives in the legislature and add other penalties or other consequences for noncompliance? This takes 2 forms. One is the form of those additional 13 grants, but the other form is now the Attorney General is suing the town of Milton. For those who depending on how you count, a few towns have gone in the tank for this law. They think it's a great idea, they love it, they said, sign me up. So I think only 3 have gotten certified by the state housing department as complying with the most recent guidelines, and that's Salem, Lexington, and Arlington. There are a number of others that have in the last 3 or 4 years passed laws, or bylaws that are toddling towards it. Rockport had a problem. They passed theirs in 2022, and it turns out it didn't comply. They're going to have to do it again in about a month. One of the other problems that we see in this law is that because of these guidelines, if you want to adopt a complying bylaw, you have to submit it to the state ahead of time. You have to get their approval, irrespective of whatever the local zoning process is. And then if it applies, you are then under an obligation to notify the state if you change it, if you adopt it, if you modify it, or even if you just happen to lose acreage. So for example, that excluded land formula, if you're in the district and you decide very generously that you're going to put a conservation restriction on your land, or you're going to donate it to your town, all of a sudden that acre, or whatever the parcel is, no longer counts in the district. And so all of a sudden, the whole district has to be amended. And this is something that towns have to continually submit data to the state housing department to determine compliance. And if they amend it or alter it or fall out of compliance, then they don't get the grants. One of the other things to keep in mind is that the grants we're talking about are not funding formula grants, which is to say that they are completely discretionary. I don't happen to like Shrewsbury. My classmate was Ryan Fatman for Sutton, and I heard terrible things about the high school athletics at Shrewsbury. So I don't like Shrewsbury. I'm not going to be getting grants. Even if you're eligible, I don't have to listen to you. It's like trying to preserve your eligibility to compete for the lottery. I'm over 18. I buy a ticket. I didn't get $1 billion last week. Did any of you? Trust me, I tried. Yes, sir.
So I think you partially answered my question, but again, I want to go back to the penalty. Is it only the 4 grants? And why is Milton being sued by the Attorney General?
We are arguing that it should only be the 4 grants. Milton is being sued in the state Supreme Court right now to determine that question. The state housing department is taking the position that if you don't comply, not only do you lose the 4 grants, you lose 13 other grants. The attorney general has taken the position that if you don't comply, we're going to sue you, and we're going to ask the judiciary to appoint a special master to take away your democratic right and draw the zoning district. They're trying to shove it into the same mold of judicial power that was used for the busing in the 1970s during desegregation, but that was in service to a constitutional paradigm of equality in the law. And to be perfectly honest, as a lawyer, we'll throw out the whole bathwater of government if the Constitution requires it, no matter how awkward or how convenient. But this isn't in service of a constitutional objective. This is in service of what someone thinks is a good idea of housing policy that someone else may disagree with. So whether or not that's allowed, my personal favorite answer to that question is that when, in order to, the state Supreme Court doesn't have to take cases. It's discretionary review. They like the Supreme Court of the United States, they only take the cases that interest them. When they agreed to take the Attorney General's case against the town of Milton from a single justice, they certified basically 2 questions. The first was basically, what does the law mean? But the second was, does the Attorney General even have the authority to be trying to enforce this at all? If you think back to the 3rd paragraph, it talks about 3 agencies that are responsible for determining compliance. One is the State Housing Department, one is the Department of Transportation, and one is the MBTA. If you remember back to Expressio Unis Alteris Exclusus, the Attorney General is not on that list, and there is no indication that the Attorney General has any power or authority or role in enforcing this law at all. I suspect it's, not that I should be prognosticating, but I suspect it's highly likely the Attorney General was apt to get her snout kicked in the state Supreme Court. A case is currently scheduled for argument in October. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, I'm just, so obviously, you're advocating for town meeting members to vote against this in the upcoming, town meeting. Is there any other action that you're advocating? Can we kind of get to, what is there, where are we leading to? What would you like? What would you like us to know? What would you like us to, what are you suggesting?
Well, I suspect
this is-
my answer may be a little bit more general and global than Craig's. Where we've been going around, we've been asking people if they find 5 or 10 people who are willing to potentially sign a motion to intervene to join our lawsuit from Rockport in Essex Superior Court to convert it into a class action. One of the other things is that if you have a town council and it doesn't say what it is, the folks in Rowley have opted to interpret the petition to kick the majority back up to 2/3. It's never been applied before. No one knows what it really means or how it should be interpreted. The folks in Rowley have taken the legal position that even though they have a town meeting, they think that because it's a local legislative assembly, they think it should apply to them. So if you know someone in the district that's going to get affected, go out and get some signatures from some landowners. Personally, normally when I have my own slides, I have a great big Nancy Reagan thing, and it's from her drug awareness campaign, and it says, just say no. So that's the basic question. Craig will have much more specific answers for you.
Yeah, the only
Are
thing.
there other things?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, but the one thing is about how the warrant article is actually written, and I'll talk a little bit about that's Article 44 on the town meeting, just specifically, and I'm going to go through that, and I don't like the way it's written, and I don't think if you're not aware of this, there's no mention of MBTA in it, and we're going to talk about that at the end. But yes,
You're
the
gonna
no
email
vote.
this to the people who gave emails so that we can see it later. I'm not gonna get to the end of the meeting, I just don't, I have a conflict.
Yeah,
So I'm trying to
absolutely.
get to the end.
And it is being recorded, and it will be posted on Shrewsbury Media Connection.
Okay, good.
But yes, we will.
I should also tell you that if it passes a town meeting, you can also do the same thing Milton did. You, as a representative, a town with representative town meeting, you can go out and get signatures, and you can take this directly to the ballot box. I gotta tell you, I'm working with people in Manchester who are very concerned. They have an open town meeting, and they're afraid that the 200 people who show up are gonna be all of one bent, and that it's not gonna be representative of the whole. They're desperately trying to find a way to get a ballot vote. They think the ballot being the best representative of democracy, you guys, at least in Shrewsbury, have the opportunity to do that. If you're from Sutton, I'm really sorry.
Mike, you should mention also, I meant to mention it earlier, but if they do vote it in, you're not gonna be able to vote it out, even if the law proves to be illegal.
If you vote it in, it becomes a local enactment, and even if the law gets taken out, because you have the independent power to enact zoning, it stays. And not only does it stay, but then it takes a 2/3 majority to change it or get rid of it. Beautifully.
So when the Supreme Court, if they decide this isn't okay to do, this is tyranny, but a town adopts it before that hearing in October, then they can't reverse course. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that there are consequences to reversing course, because here's the rule of zoning. If I'm a developer and I'm zoned and I'm legal, it doesn't matter if the next day after I pull my building permit, as long as I've started construction, I'm in. So even adopting it, even if it's invalid for a short period, you have opened yourself to exposure. And I promise developers are watching, and anybody who's got any local plans, they're gonna take a good look at it. Yes, sir.
I have two concerns.
Yes, sir.
The first, could you explain the logic of why this is revolving around the MBTA rail line from Boston to Worcester? That's number one. And if it is, that's in contradiction as to what went on in the 1950s and the 1960s concerning rail service in this country.
Yes, the answer to the second question is yes. The answer for the rationale is because the academic and urban planning trade journals have been talking for about 15 years or so about trying to change the model of zoning. Basically, if you're an academic and you see the American dream slipping away, you're trying to figure out the answer to the question. And the best answer they could come up with is that we can no longer dream of living in a world where there's a white picket fence and 2.2 kids and a dog in a single family acre zoning. And so this is essentially attempting to take the urban sprawl and spread it out into the suburbs. It's not eliminating the suburbs, although some people have characterized this as the death of single family zoning. It's an attempt to advance urban zoning and enable to us to meet what we perceive as future housing challenges. For those who defend the law, what they point out is that in the last 30 years, because zoning has increasingly ratcheted up, the number of houses that we've been building, new construction has gone down precipitously. At the same time, our total population is continuing to expand. Part of the reason that we lose, many people argue the reason that people leave Massachusetts is because of taxes or lack of jobs or lack of housing or unfriendly business climate. But other people who are for the pro-housing simply tell you that it's like trying to pour water into a cup that's already full. And so the idea is that we should make more houses. One of the other downsides, people who are complaining about the affordability component, the crisis, have also argued that if we create more housing, it will alter the supply and demand dynamics. But what that really is to you is it's talking about lowering housing values. And that's about as popular as the draft. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a couple things, one of which is going to be very unpopular. So it seems to me that we had someone in a pretty high up position of authority next to Governor Baker who has a family that is in corporate real estate and development. Not going to name a name. I just find that a little odd that this went from being an affordable housing thing to like a zoning and development. Just saying, it seems very coincidental. This is just something that's been kind of on my mind. And then
Lieutenant Governor Polito was a barrier-breaking administrator. Go ahead.
And then also, the whole thing, the MBTA, I was just listening today on the radio and they're talking about how with the Red Line trains, we're continuing to pay for these trains that have yet to be delivered. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of a connection there. But ultimately, my real question is, what is our action plan as far as for us as residents before our town meeting in May? What are we doing? Do we need mailers? Because I feel like there's probably a lot of town meeting members that, have no idea. And there's quite frankly a lot of people in town, myself included until recently, that didn't really realize we were a representative town meeting. I thought we were open. I had no idea. I was oblivious. I had young kids. I was doing my thing, being a mom, and all of a sudden I woke up and was like, I have a say in this, but wait, I only have a say if I'm one of the 200 some odd town meeting members.
Craig will have a much better answer for you in a second. But to answer your question about the MBTA housing component, the reason the MBTA communities are listed out in the MBTA statute, Chapter 161, is because if you are an MBTA community, in addition to whatever else goes on, you pay a large fee to the MBTA to support their continued service of your city or town, even if you're an adjacent community, as long as you're listed in the statute. If you're one of the 177, you comply. Linfield grumbled for years and years because we're not really there's a Wakefield rail line and there's a Reading rail line. We're right in the middle. We're not really serviced by them, but there's a bus stop that comes 100 feet into Linfield. And for that, we pay the MBTA $164,000 a year out of our budget. There are only two bus lines that go. One is a once-a-day direct bus to Haymarket from Goodland Circle, and the other is one that connects you to downtown Lynn. And I promise you, it's not at all walkable, considering that it's right off the highway interchange on the Rotary. So if you're an MBTA adjacent community, your budget is. Right now, you've been paying for years in your budget to support the MBTA. So every time you see about how it doesn't work, or about how it hasn't expanded, or about how the trains catch on fire, or whatever the problem of the day is, I assure you, you have a stake in it, even if you've never seen it in your local budget. In terms of action plan, I'm going to defer that to Craig. I estimate that I'm running out of steam and time, but yes, sir.
My second question, have any towns adopted this to this point? And if they have, has there been any independent study that's been done looking at these towns to see if there are negative effects to these towns?
It's still very new, but let me rattle some facts off real quick. There are several towns that oppose it, there are several that are for it. The ones that are for it, the only ones that are gold standard are Lexington, Salem, and Arlington, that are certified by the State Housing Department. There are another dozen or so that have jumped the gun, like Rockport, and tried to pass complying bylaws that were certified in the Attorney General, but because they didn't meet the State Housing Department's changing schedule, they actually aren't in compliance. There are only 3 that are directly in compliance. In terms of those that are opposing it, you all heard of Milton. Holden has gone out there. They're awesome. Because this law has an implementation date, and the law is being phased in based on which of the categories your town is, whether you're high rapid transit or adjacent. There's a series of deadlines. Most of about 100 of the 177 have to comply by the end of this year, and then there are a handful that are small adjacent towns. I think Sutton is one of them that don't have to comply until the end of 2025. Where's our goal? Holden. Yes, I'm going to Holden. So Holden, because it's being phased in over several years, and these grant rounds continue annually, they were having a terrible quandary to determine how do we determine who's compliant if the compliance deadline hasn't come yet. So almost all cities and towns were asked to send in a 5-page form where some bureaucrat or some planning board member signed a 5-page form and said, well, if we were going to comply, here are the steps that we take to get to compliance. They were all universally approved no matter what, because the State Housing Department is pleased as pie to boast that 176 or 177 cities and towns have submitted their compliance plans and they're in interim compliance. The governor was boasting about that. And it's only a 5-page form. It's not, there's no democratic buy-in, there's no large support. It's just an official in town hall signing a document. Holden refused to submit a compliance form. That their town administrator is an attorney, he's prepared to fight. They actually got sued in Superior Court by a pro-housing think tank, and they won about a year ago. So Holden is all in on opposing it. Chelmsford has opted to pursue what they're calling paper compliance. The town of Rentham has written several letters to the governor complaining about the law. The town of Woburn has said that we don't need the grants. We already comply, and we're not drawing a stupid district just to make the state feel warm and fuzzy. I thought that was a very brave stance by the mayor.
Was it Milton or
Middleborough actually initially refused to even sign the 5-page paper form for interim compliance. The State Housing Department went on its knees to the town and said, town selectmen, please do it. Maybe you can fight the battle with us at the end of it. So he said, well, we'll sign the form, but we're still going to do our own thing. We're focused on our 40B mandate, and we'll deal with you later. So Middleborough has no intention of complying, and there are lots of people who are saying no. So don't feel like you're forced into it. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
You mentioned something about signatures. What can you talk about it?
So I do not know, and no one does know, if the petition can bump the majority back up to 2/3 in either an open town meeting or a representative town meeting town. Rowley has adopted the thing, yes. So if you can get signatures representing 50% of the voters in a district or within 100 yards of the boundary of a district, you at least have an argument that the voting majority threshold at town meeting should be bumped back up to 2/3.
Any one district.
Any one district
half
can bump it back up to
of voters.
2/3.
Anyone's zone district.
Anyone's own
Proposed district.
Yeah. So the second thing I was talking about signatures is that for those of you from Shrewsbury, you are a representative town meeting, which means that you have the right, if the town meeting were to go and do something really dumb, you could get enough signatures, and it's, I believe I looked it up earlier, it is if you can get signatures representing 5% of the registered voters within 10 days of town hall, you are entitled to force a ballot vote. It essentially takes town meeting, whatever town meeting did, and it throws it to the voters and it says, do you like it or not? And that's what happened in Milton, East Milton, which was really getting socked by these bubble districts, some of which were going to have ridiculously high densities. I think I saw like 42 units per acre. They will be tall monstrosities. And it's not surprising all the neighbors came out and voted no, and they were motivated to do so, even though the representative town meeting went in the tank overwhelmingly so. Yes, ma'am.
Just out of curiosity, I don't know if you know the answer, but how many other states are going through this kind of thing?
So several of the more progressive states are experimenting with transit-oriented housing and other variations on it. Even Massachusetts has several variations like Chapter 40R and 40S or the starter home districts. None of them have models exactly like this. More importantly, I can also tell you that since the Home Rule Amendment was adopted in 1966, this is the first time the state has ever tried to compel cities and towns to do something like this. So it is unique and historical, and the court case in the state Supreme Court will be very interesting. Yes, sir.
Have you seen any evidence that this ties into the whole Agenda 2030 thing being advocated by the left?
Sorry, I'm going to have to defer to you there, although I do tend to lean a little Republican. I'm afraid I don't know about Agenda 2030 or Agenda 21.
Okay.
I'm going to have to speculate or maybe ask Mr. Sobel if that. Yes, sir, in the back.
Let me ask you, I had a conversation with our state rep, and he said the state is trying to take over all zoning statewide. Is this a step to potentially test the waters, whether they can actually do that?
If the state were going to do it, it would start a trial balloon just like this, yes. For those of you who have studied the governor's housing bond bill, it includes ADUs as of right in every city and town across all zoning districts. It includes new inclusionary zoning, which is for those of you who thought that Chapter 40B was the greatest thing since sliced bread, we are going to take it and make it mandatory in every city and town in zoning districts. It also includes new taxes and all kinds of other really fascinating things that are coming down the pipeline. So the good news is that that's still in the legislature, and even the House of Representatives was so aghast at the bill that they are redrawing it almost top to bottom. We'll see what comes out of it, but keep an eye on it because it's coming, something. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so Shrewsbury, right now, does get some money from those grants. I know they amount, but it's a good amount.
They got money. They don't currently get money, they've received money in the past.
So I actually, although the governor's office has.
I know they had a meeting and they explained them.
We're gonna show you their exact slides.
In that case, that'll be an excellent segue for me to hand over the floor. Let me just give you one quick couple of facts. The governor threatened that if this cities and towns didn't comply, not only were they going to go after those 4 grants and then the other 13 buckets of money, but they were also going to come after school and road monies. They were going to make it hurt. I will tell you that those are produced, that Chapter 90 money controls roads and Chapter 70 controls school money, and those are formula funding mechanisms. The cities and towns are entitled to get paid under the existing statutes, and they cannot be deprived of those money in compliance with statute. It would require an affirmative change in the law to deprive any city or town of school and road money. What I can tell you is that between 2020 and 2024, your total receipts in the town of Shrewsbury went from $144 million to $180,373,860 against a state aid budget ranging between $26 million to going down to $24 million. As in to say that in 2020, state aid was approximately 10% of your total receipts. It's gone down to about 7.9%, but that is all of the money that the state gives you, including things that are protected like school lunch money, school money, special ed money, and road money. So there is absolutely no indication the governor can touch those funds in the attempt of trying to compel cities and towns to do this. So unless there are no questions, I'm going to turn it back over to our local crowd.
It's your.
Is there any representative in your group that's going to go to the town meeting to present this information prior to a vote? Because there is only 200 town meeting members that go. I was a former town meeting member, and basically a lot of the people just vote because the planning board says we approve it. And so the planning board sits there and says, we approve it, and whatever, how many members there are, and the majority just go along with the planning board. So how is the other, I'm assuming that there's only a small, significant amount of people that are town meeting members sitting here. How are they gonna get informed? How is the public that is going to that meeting, which is coming up, I believe, in the next week or so, going to get this information? So they're just gonna arbitrarily vote for it and they're not gonna have the information.
Un-
And we're screwed. After that, we're
Unfortunately, the
done.
floor at town meeting is controlled by the town meeting members and the moderator. If you are not a town meeting member, you do not have the right to speak. You can speak at town meeting only at their grace. Hopefully, some of our local team get some floor time, but in terms of any communication to town meeting members, that will, almost 90% of that task must be done before town meeting
I
by voters.
understand that, but what I'm saying is there a town meeting member that you can educate them
Yes.
to get up and speak on your behalf?
Yes.
Because it's never gonna work.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, we have at the end of this, a very specific bullet points of calls to action that we will go over as well. But yes, and the town meeting is on May 20th, so we do have a little bit of time, so it's about, 6 weeks away.
Is there any way we can see a show of hands of any town members that are
Town
here?
meeting members?
Yeah, don't they have another meeting?
There's a bunch.
Good
Good representation, thank you.
Yeah, there's 240.
Thank you.
80 of which, just so you know, on the 7th of May, right, for the town, so 1/3 of those are up every year for reelection, so there'll be 80 that are up for reelection on the 7th. So we need to know, not only who are existing town meeting members, but those who are going to either get elected or reelected, to understand what their stance is, so that when you go on the 7th, if you're, depending on your viewpoint on this, that you are electing those town meeting members that share your viewpoint on this particular article. But Ryan is going to dig into our details on what Shrewsbury is proposing, just so you know where it is, what it looks like, and also we're going to talk about that town warrant, and he's going to show you specifically the grant. So we are showing you the slides that Shrewsbury did present.
And I want to start off, my name's Brian Costello, I've been in Shrewsbury for 15 years. I grew up in Worcester, so I didn't make a very long drive. I want to just share a story. I was in Boston last night for a business dinner. It took me about 35, 40 minutes on the Mass Pike to get there for a 6 o'clock dinner, and then it took me 45 minutes to get to dinner after I got off the Mass Pike downtown. And I thought, this is a great place for a transit-oriented community. The reality is, Boston is exempt from this law.
Yeah.
So the people that make this law actually aren't really thinking what's good for you is good for them, because it's just not. The timeline here put together is, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to go through everything here, and we can put this up so people can download it. But it just shows the long timeline that it took to kind of get all of this going, and then how you and your towns have to kind of comply. What's generally happened, and I think just for a layman's terms, it's been changed so often that towns that thought they complied didn't comply. Towns that thought they were doing the right thing, turns out they weren't doing the right thing. And then there are towns who just rubber stamped because they actually didn't take much time. And I do want to bring one thing up. I don't actually think there's any negative or kind of a backdoor kind of beliefs in our town fathers and our planning boards in a lot of these towns. I do think they tend to be bureaucrats. And so they look at a very simple guideline and they say, oh, we're supposed to do this thing, and so they do, right? They don't actually put a lot of thought into it because their job isn't to think about what's the intent. And the intent was really, at the beginning, to be an Affordable Housing Act, which then became a Not Affordable Housing Act. And then what happened was, it became a situation where people didn't actually understand what it was. And so they just filled out this 5-page form, which they're really not compliant, it's just a form. So when you hear the governor, but then when the current governor came in, she immediately established this housing organization, and now they're asking for $4 billion. That housing, as Greg said, that's the people that actually determine if you're compliant or not. By the way, the number one group that supports this, and the number one group that supports that housing organization, are massive developers. When you really look at it, it's actually a handful of developers that build these things in the state. They get the money, and they get a lot of money. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. Our status is there's an action plan approved, but there actually is no pre-adoption. In other words, you had the option to send your plan to the state and just say, hey, does this work? A lot of towns have done that, and they got the answer back. Nope, sorry, doesn't work. Some of them tried to play games according to the state. Wellesley, for instance, said, We're packed. Here are all of our apartments. We comply. The state said, no, you don't. So the state has the right, even if you think you comply and you actually do by letter of the law, they can just say no. So when they tell you this is not a building law, it is a zone that allows building by people that then understand, very sophisticated developers that know how to come into town like 40B and just say, here's the plan. It's a couple little changes, maybe a sidewalk thing, but they have to approve it and they have to go through it. We never even went through the process of sending the zone I'm going to show you to the state. The state, by the way, is going to reject it. I can tell you that right now. There's not a doubt in my mind. The key compliance criteria, 50 acres, roughly 1,500 units. You'll see that in Shrewsbury and some other towns. It's actually over 100 acres. What's the total size? 100 and...
It's the next.
Yeah, it's the next slide.
173.
173. The reason being, so this is the zone. If you're trying to figure it out, this is the Christmas tree shop here. That's my house right there. The idea behind it is we've zoned 173 acres. What the town is going to try to tell you is very simple. The reason we did that is because then we can zone so that it's a smaller building. So imagine if it's 50 acres with 1,500 units, it's taller buildings. This is all they're trying to tell you. You don't want tall buildings. You don't want, what's it called now, Arrive. It used to be Fountainhead in Westboro, right? Right? You don't want that. So we're going to do more acres. And so there's going to be more units, but they still will be townhouse units, or I think it's 3-story. I think it's the highest based on what they're telling you in town. But it goes back to they cannot stop them from building that once it's zoned. All right. They will tell you that it's an overlay zone and that they're compliant. And let's just say there's a gentleman that bought the Christmas tree shops. He's from Rentham, I think. He owns trampoline parks. You have a giant 50-acre trampoline park, and we're not. He bought that for a reason. But let's say he built that. The state is going to come back and say you're no longer compliant. The town is telling us, no, we just have to do this. The reality is that's not what happens. The state will come back and say you're no longer compliant, give us a new zone. And so we're not going to get away from this by winking at the state and saying, oh, it's a zone, we did it, we did our part. I'm telling you right now that when you look at what the state's telling other towns, that actually have some legitimate zones, some good zones with a lot of housing, a lot of apartments. They're saying no because it's a building law. It's a building act. And a gentleman asked why. And it is that belief, if you think about transit-oriented communities, it's a 10, 15 years. I have the displeasure of being an urban studies major in college. That's been around for 30 years. And the idea is to bring urban living further out from the urban zone. The idea, whether you like it or not, you could say, well, to what the gentleman said, we all want to live in these great little towns with boulevards and walkable things. The reality is most towns aren't that. It also isn't about jobs, because most of the jobs in Massachusetts are not on the commuter rail. All right? So when you listen to the folks that are actually supporting this law, besides the woman who was I think a state rep who said we have to crush Milton, there's another person in the ELC that said, I don't believe in one car, one person. Doesn't like it. Doesn't like that people drive to work. The reality is work isn't actually all in Boston, right? A lot of us live in, work in Burlington, or you're not going to be able to take the train there, right? So Massachusetts isn't set up that way. We don't all, like in New York, you can argue. A lot of people go right into the cities from Long Island and everywhere. There are a lot of people going into Boston, but not as many work in Boston as live in the suburbs. Work in the suburbs as Waltham, Burlington, go down to Foxborough, people drive to Providence. There's a lot of people, especially in central Massachusetts, I think, who actually works in town or near town in this room.
In this town?
Yeah. Who works in Boston? Right. And then who goes someplace else? Right, I go somewhere. Well, I work out of my living room. But I mean, when I do travel, I have to go to Detroit, which is not much fun. So the considerations, you can see it here. We are not under the 0.5 half mile rule because we're an adjacent community. So this could go anywhere in town. And I think that, again, goes back to the intent. The intent isn't about transit. It's about housing. It's about putting houses someplace and kind of packing towns. Yeah.
But do you think that a goal is to expand the
Yes.
trains, like expand?
No.
the-
You'll never get a train to, for instance, the train that goes through Westboro, they're not going to build a spur anywhere.
I feel like
It would
with everything
be,
they're building up, I feel like they would almost have to build that up as well.
no, that would make sense. You can't. You can't because it's billions of dollars. And imagine, I think back in the day,
alright.
somebody has the number, all of the Mass Pike costs less than Newton to Boston, Mass Pike, right? Because you have to acquire land. So you wouldn't see that happening anytime soon. You could see maybe bus lines or something like that, but nobody takes the bus. Underlying, the zoning is not affected. So again, you can have a zone, and this is an overlay zone. So it can be zoned, for instance, Christmas tree shop is retail. It's still zoned retail. Their point is somebody could build there, and if it's retail, then we're still in compliance. That is not true. They will tell you you're not in compliance. The transit-oriented development we talked about, the 15 units per acre, that's why we have the 100 acres. A lot of it's not buildable, by the way. That's the other thing that's going to hit the state. They're going to tell us you can't build there. For instance, down along Walnut Street, behind where my mom lives in Minna Terrace, there's actually the aquifer is a problem there. There's not enough, you actually couldn't build there. So the town is, the state will reject this, and so part of it is also let town meeting members know we're kind of going backwards. We should have presented something to the state first and then voted on something. But if we do vote, we're stuck with the thing, because then the town can change where we want to put it. They can say, oh, we're not in compliance, so we're going to put it in your backyard, which nobody likes. I do want to get to this. This is a popular slide, and the town loves it. It's actually not right. And I've asked them to change it. It says grant opportunities at risk, total 4.8 million. We received in the past $4.8 million in these 4 grants. A good portion of those grants was for Edgemere apartments where the Market Basket is. So the grants were used to build more housing, right? Most of these grants were used to build more housing or to do a study on should we build more housing. Okay? So if we lose those grants, so what, in my opinion? I'm not worried. Now, the bigger issue is the state saying, well, you can lose other grants. It's not in the law. I do think there's a good case against that. But this is past money, not future money. It's not at risk. What's at risk today is absolutely zero, because maybe there's 1 or 2 $10,000 grants, but very few dollars that is at risk. This is past money that's spent. We don't have to give back. And so when the town shows this, they're being disingenuous, because that money's not at risk. It's gone. Now, what's at risk is if I wanted to apply for a future grant to build more housing, most likely, I would lose that money, right? So that's the big grant. That's the Route 20 grant. So this was for Edgemere. There's Market Baskets there now, but so that was for the Edgemere development and doing Route 20 improvements. But it was specifically built. The sewer extension's great, $600,000, but everything else was really built because they were building this giant apartment complex where the Market Basket is. You wouldn't have needed that. The sewer grant we can argue about. I think we probably needed that, but the 3.7 for the Route 20 improvements was primarily because we built a giant housing project right on Route 20. The other one here is a site readiness plan for Centec Park. Again, possibly something we would need. Tax dollars that aren't revenue from housing, maybe not a bad thing. But I think this is debatable. We could say, could we get this money from elsewhere? Would a developer provide this money? The developers that actually built there actually gave the town some land back. I think the Allen Quonset hut is actually given to the town. If you want it, you can apply to do something with it. But that's one that was a visioning study. In other words, should we have this? What's it look like? Go ahead.
So how does the as of right thing affect this? Because on these things, I'm assuming, went through a whole planning board review meeting and impact studies on all of the infrastructure and services and all that.
Mm-hmm.
The as of right, wasn't there a statement made that that's not required for this overlay?
Yeah.
So you kind of walk into it blind as to what that impact is?
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the Affordable Housing Act, you'll see a lot of this happens in Shrewsbury. The town will tell you this gives us a little more control than a 40B development. Because a 40B development says if I meet the requirement for affordable housing in my proposed units, I can just build it within certain small changes, right? This is similar in the sense that once it's zoned, so this 100 acres, for example, 1,500 units, and it meets the size. So let's say I'm a developer and I just happen to get a lot of money from the state and I just happen to know all the regulations and how to build within these things. If I come to the town with a plan that meets what you zoned, I can quibble a little, but I'm going to be able to build. In other words, the town can quibble a little, but if I meet that requirement, I can build by right. It just goes through no special permit.
If all of a sudden you've got a sewer and water problem because of demand,
They'll have, so that's something they would probably try to build in,
okay.
right? Because the developer does have to do site work and all of that stuff. They have to sort of, they oftentimes they have to improve. So the town can do things like, you have to improve the street, put a sidewalk, you have to have some lighting, you have to have maybe the right storage, right? So it might cost the developer a little bit more money, but most of these developers have actually already done the work to know that that's just sunk cost.
But it's the school system, healthcare, and all those other.
Sorry, that's off the tip. The developer doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
Right? And so what will happen is, it also ups your 40B. These 1,500 units are market price, which means now you have more units in town, which means your 40B requirement goes up. All right, so you still get all 40B requirements.
And those are all renters, so they won't be paying property.
Some would be, you could actually build condos. It doesn't have to be rental units in this law. You could build units that are for sale, or apartments. This woman was first, and then.
I think this might be part of it. We are working in precinct 3
Yeah.
that they're building, and you didn't know that.
Precinct 9 is Christmas tree shop.
Christmas tree shop, yeah.
Because I know that's right on the line. And where, as town committee members, can we get this kind of information that we could get to the people before the town meeting? Because they did this once before, there were problems when they were building the market basket, and that's what I have.
Yeah.
And I was able to send out, you get a list of the voters that, voted, and you can send these to them. And we did that in some of the other things, and stopped some of the roads that were changed.
That's one of the things we want to do. The list of obviously it's public record, who's a town committee, as well as their address. And so we do want to reach out to these folks individually. I appreciate everybody that showed up that's actually town, but we do want to reach out to everybody that's can vote. And we do need to educate them through a pamphlet or mailing or whatever it happens to be, these meetings.
And my next question is, really, what does it mean, affordable housing? What does it actually mean?
Well, there's I don't know if it's in there, but there's a state guideline. It's depending on size of family, where you are in the state, and so on, that meets certain rules and regulations. It's a very detailed, oriented thing. This has nothing to do with affordable housing because it's not an affordable housing law. So I could literally come in and build 1,500 market-priced units. And to give an idea, in Westboro, the one right near the train station, those homes, those are going for $700,000-800,000. They're not cheap units, and they're all filled with, every single one of them has a kid, or more than one. Somebody over here?
So if town meeting members go no, other than the grants, is there any other negative ramifications? Is it clearly stated that it's just the grants?
I asked that question to the town. I said, what's your plan B? I got a blank stare. The quick answer is they want to then schedule another town meeting right after that.
Well, October.
Well, my question is, in the law, is there anything else other than the grants that the town has?
Technically, no. Well, we don't know, but if there is a compliance date we have to meet, right? And so after that, we're likely assuming the Attorney General will sue everybody. Our feeling is a lot of towns are saying no.
Can't sue it.
Ultimately, you can't sue everybody. Right? And they are beholden to the voters. Now, they just got in, but they are beholden to the voters. Enough towns getting together, I think, is going to say, you need to really work with us. Governor Keeley has said, I want to work for the town. I want to work with the town. She said that. The next day, her Attorney General sued everybody. So she doesn't. But this forces the hand, and to Greg's point, this is community action, right? I mean, enough towns get together, we can change even this law. Because our state reps will listen. And
That actually leads me to my next question. Is anybody aware, have any of the town managers collaborated on this? Because there's plenty of towns against this. Have they got together or any of the
I
select
don't know.
boards? Have
They
select
told
boards
us that
reached out
they
to other
did.
towns?
they tell us they did.
Yeah, we went to one of the
I
meetings.
haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's easily 50 towns that would be, willing to get in together and fight this, but has that happened?
A lot of the networking by the professional local administrators, town halls, what have you, are done by the Massachusetts Municipal Association. A lot of that occurs behind closed doors, and we can't access it, we can't see it. There are a number of town officials appointed and elected who have spoken out against it, and they are starting to work together, but not in any organized fashion. It's very embryonic at this stage.
This is what's going
Yeah.
to be voted on.
Yeah,
This
thi-
is the
yeah.
wording of the question to town meeting members. If
Yeah.
you notice,
Well, first thing is tonight, the finance committee is going through the articles. I doubt they're going to get to 44 for public comment.
yeah,
Their second meeting is scheduled, I think, on the 25th for the remaining articles where public comment can be made. As a zoning related article, we can also go to the May planning board, which I believe is on the 4th. And I don't know if they even have the ability to change the language, but my argument in the language is when you read it, if you notice, it doesn't say anything about MBTA at all. If you as a town meeting member were not aware of, heard about MBTA, I'm not sure if you read this, you would know that they were connected. It does mention the Transit-Oriented Development TOD district, right? And then it also states that the purpose is to satisfy the requirements of 40A3A and also to contribute to the housing growth goals. But like I mentioned, no Communities Act mentioning, and it says it would. Yes, sir.
I hate to interrupt. Can you go back to the point line?
Yeah.
So, make sure I understood what you just said. At the town meeting,
Yes.
this is the language.
proposal.
As it is today on the official warrant that was issued.
We'll sit and listen to. They may get a packet 2 days prior to the meeting.
Yes.
They won't read it because they don't have time to. This is gibberish.
Yes.
From an understandability.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there are a number of questions. You say, what does that mean? How does that work? How do you
Well, I think that's why we're just
sure that they vote something other than yes?
Well, they are using the article number of trying to remember, if you can remember, vote no on 44, unless, that's kind of where we start. And then trying to see if we can get the language modified to at least insert the fact that it's related to MBTA communities. So that it,
Sounds great. It sounds like an overlay, right?
Right.
People don't understand what that means. It is a zone that will allow, and it's going to be rejected, but it is a zone that does require, ultimately, it will allow developers to come in as a right and build on
Yeah.
1,500 units.
Yeah.
That's what Shrewsbury's 1,497.
yeah, and where we were, my thought process on this is the pre-adoption review, if you look at the intention of it, it's very clear. It's to seek assurance that your proposed zoning will meet the requirements before bringing to local legislative session. Our local legislative session is town meeting. All right, we chose as a town not to do this, right? And to Brian's point, there's there's at least 10. There was 45 towns that submitted. I found 10 letters, all rejection letters. All right, you can see the towns. It's Topsfield, Wilmington, Sherburne, Sterling, Danvers, Easton. And what the language states, there's two key blurbs that they put on there is, after review and analysis, we determine that your applicant does not demonstrate that it meets the requirements. And they also have verbiage that says, for the foregoing reasons, we recommend the town address the issues before putting the district to legislative vote, right? So these mechanisms are available to the town. We chose not to do it, but we're still pushing forward and putting it on the warrant for town meeting. So if nothing else, agree or disagree, the due diligence was not done in Shrewsbury to submit the proposed district to the organization that has the authority to tell us whether or not we comply.
That's the bad news.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the bad news is that passing it, and then we would then have to go for a vote. We would then have to get enough.
Yeah, because my concern on that is if you read the end here, it's essentially says, right, adding the TOD overlay district as shown on the exhibit plan on file with the office of the town clerk. So if the district what the town clerk has today gets rejected, they amend it, and now we have a new plan that's at the town clerk, does this language even require us to go back to town meeting to get approval if the zone has to get modified significantly?
Right, because the state's saying modify it. Well, we already approved that. I don't have to go back to you and ask. I'm gonna put it someplace else. I don't know where, but we'll figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah, so the town is trying to get the word out. They've had a meeting last week, and they're having 3 additional meetings, and they're wording it MBTA, and they're trying to explain it to everybody. There's been several emails that have gone out to town meeting members to make them aware of this. Also, if you want to come to the meeting, I'm sure they will let you, because they do have opposition people speaking at any meeting when there's a controversial issue like this coming up. So I wouldn't think they denied it, not on a big issue.
Well, we've gone, I think a bunch of us have gone to
Because
these.
people don't go. So I was on one, was it last week when they had the virtual, and I was
Yeah, I
kind of
was
blowing
there.
up the chat? He's like, oh, look, it's all these questions from one person. That was it. I think that's the problem, is there'll be like 13 people in the room, so
Yeah,
they're
but
like,
they try
hey,
to get the word out. It's not,
and it's not
you
working.
can't make them come, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the argument is I'm not suggesting that the town's not trying to tell people about the MBTA Communities Act, the 3A,
blindsided by
but
this.
they're not connecting the dots to the actual warrant article to say, hey, all these, all the public comment, all the
Yeah, but
the
when
set-
it comes to the
yeah,
town meeting,
yeah.
they will sufficiently explain it. But people aren't aware of it. That's why I'm saying you should come to the meeting.
Yeah, I will.
Speak to the chairman, Beth Cassavant, and I'm sure she will, work something out with you.
Yeah, well, it's the moderator in that case, which is James Kane for the town meeting. Because the moderator at the town meeting is the one who actually gets to read the article.
Chairman of the select board.
Yeah, but she
That's
doesn't
sort of
run
the
the town meeting.
executive arm,
Yeah.
and the town meeting is sort of like the legislative arm, so they're 2 separate
Yeah,
arms on the same body.
yeah, they're just making the planning board's recommending a zoning article and a warrant, and then that goes to the town meeting to review. Yes, sorry, in the back.
My experience has been that when you go to a select board meeting, you don't let them talk.
Well, if ahead of time you filed that you want to speak, then you can. But you do have to, I think, ask for permission ahead of time to speak. But they will if you ask ahead of
But
time.
you ran into that up on the North Shore. Certain towns have certain, like, is it a open meeting? Is it not an open meeting? Understanding all of that is important because you're right. Certain types of meeting, they can say, sorry, no, you cannot speak. Other types of meetings, they will let you speak, but it has to be I think it's called an open meeting, right? But by law, they can change that. They can say, this is, sorry, nobody's saying a word.
Yeah, but she's alone. You can ask questions. This is.
They can if the meeting is such. If they decide they don't want you to and they set up a different meeting, they can. Well,
Yes, they do.
they don't do that.
Yes, they do. Sorry, yes, they do.
Yes, sir. Hold on.
The rule of the town meeting, my understanding and what I've seen done in practice, is that if a non-town meeting member wants to speak at the town meeting, he has to receive previous agreement from the town
Yeah,
moderator.
that's what we're saying. Yeah.
Correct.
To speak at that meeting, and that moderator could accept or deny that split. That's how I think it's been in the past.
Even then, it's very, so, you have to be very careful, because somebody can move the question,
Yeah.
and if you don't get enough people to vote against it, it could be a 10-minute discussion, a 15-minute discussion, and you see how long we've been here, so.
I don't know who's gonna get was
At
first.
least to have a big discussion.
Go ahead.
Have you received an official statement from a state rep, whether Hannah Kane, whether she's for or against it?
They voted for it.
She voted for it. I can't tell you if she's currently for it. I can't tell you that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very well connected.
I don't have an official statement from her now on it. But to Brian's point, she did vote for it in the original bill. Well, I can't unequivocally state that. Yes.
So the last statement she made was that she's for this project.
she voted for this.
In her official capacity as a representative, she voted for it. I don't know currently what her position is, and as a town meeting member, how she would vote. I don't know that.
Yeah, for the 3 paragraphs, remember?
Right.
It was just the 3 paragraphs.
Yes.
So rather than trying to fight the tide with existing meetings and, forums that may not really be the right place for that, what's the thinking in this room to not ask for permission, right? Like, I don't know why we should have to ask permission to make a lot of noise. So that's something we can just go do, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, the town meeting members, their email addresses, when I sent them a reminder for this meeting, they're all right online. So,
Right.
like, start emailing them all, right? I mean, follow these town pages, I mean, we can make noise without anyone's permission.
Correct.
Yes.
Town meeting member, and I was gonna suggest that, hearing what's going on, it seems like anybody who's against this, and I think it would be great for the people who are organizing this, to put together some type of, I don't know, 1 or 2 pages of information you want town meeting members to know about for town meeting, and email it to everybody. And that way, nobody can say they weren't aware of it. I've been a town meeting member for a long, long time. I can tell you maybe twice, somebody from my precinct has contacted me to express an opinion. Because the regular, as you were saying, you were just being a mom, you didn't know how town government worked. They just don't realize that it's only the 240 town meeting members that are gonna make a decision for a whole town.
And one email's not gonna do it, right?
No.
Like,
No.
it's numbers here, you have to make enough noise to reconsider, to miss one email, you get a million every day.
Yeah, and I mean, my recommendation was always, I think people, right? The rapport of going to talk to somebody in person. If you're in a precinct, like on the list, right, that you can go and look at the town meeting members, it does say what precinct you're in. So knowing your own precinct, identifying the town meeting members in your precinct, you can go knock on a door, right? I know people anymore, get scared if somebody knocks on your door, but I mean, yeah. So you got the camera and you can say, introduce yourself and just say, I just want to make you aware, this is something I'm passionate about, or I think you should vote no at town meeting. I think the more, just talking to people, we've really gotten away in general as a society of talking to people in person and actually going out and having conversations. So you can learn a lot from doing that. So we encourage people to say, spread the word, talk to your neighbors, talk to friends, family, coworkers, it impacts more than just Shrewsbury. There's other towns out there. So it's not just a Shrewsbury issue. As you mentioned, call, write, email your elected town meeting members, the select committee, even, the planning boards, it doesn't hurt for them to know how we stand or how you view certain things. And like we mentioned, there was, yes, sure.
It's really interesting when this was all proposed in, 2021, when we were all locked down and nobody knew what was going on and everybody was afraid to talk to anybody, and they tried to sneak this through. And, you asked, where is this happening? It's happening all over the world. It's not just, and you can say this is a conspiracy, but this woman, Rosa Quire, out in California, in 2010, she wrote a book called Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21.
Yep.
And this was passed in Rio de Janeiro in the 1990s. President Clinton talked about it, Bush has talked about it, and it's just coming out now. So this has been planned for a long time.
This is control grid legislation, right here. That's why I was asking if it's happening in other states, because I feel like it might be an agenda.
Well, it is a template. I mean, this law is a template for the federal government in a way, right?
Yeah.
Massachusetts often is. Think about the Obamacare and all that stuff. Massachusetts was first. Good or bad, right? But I think every state is looking at this and trying to figure it out. They want more housing. This, again, not about affordable housing. I don't think anybody here quibbles that it would be great to have more affordable housing in a lot of places. But a lot of us don't live certain places because we can't afford it, right? And so we move. right? I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's a challenge, right? And I think if this was affordable housing, we would be having a different conversation, all right? But this was specifically about build, build, build. And when you look at the people that are supporting this, they are the large developers. They make a lot of money and then they don't have to worry about the school. They don't have to worry about the fire station, the police station, the sewer, they don't have to worry about anything, all right? And I think that's our concern is, we,
Infrastructure.
I've only been here 15 years, my taxes have gone up, tripled.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not anti-school.
No.
I want great schools. I don't know if this does that. Right? It puts a lot of burden on us.
Yeah.
And that's my worry.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and just to tie onto that, just as another FYI, and then, we're almost out of time, but the select board, right, was just talking about 2 days ago, we did as a town of Shrewsbury file again for a notice of intent for expansion of the high school. The vote was 3-2 to do that. Just to give you a ramification of that, the high school proposal is an 80,000 square foot addition, which is going to cost $140 million. The state will only pay half of that. So there'll be a $70 million, if that would go through, a $70 million burden to the taxpayers. And on top of that, they're also talking about an override, which we did in 2021, which they said would have 4 years, but they're trying to push that to 26. So there most likely will be another override vote and potentially a second one to support a $70 million addition with the current population to the high school. So there is those other factors to take into consideration when we're talking about adding additional residents and additional housing.
And the number of children estimate out of this is literally one elementary school. So again, bigger high school,
Yep.
high school,
Yep.
elementary school, you can see where it's going.
So, hey,
Keep in mind too, in the summer, we're on water restrictions, and then when it's really hot, we use backup generators for the town. I mean, can't imagine reducing our town by 10% just on these units, and then what's that gonna do to the infrastructure?
Yeah,
No?
exactly. I think
Well,
that's the wrap up. So-
yep. So I thank everybody for coming tonight. Everybody who gave their email address or contact, we can send out a copy of this information, copy of the presentation if you'd like to share it. We do have those flyers. I'll probably also attach an electronic copy of that. So if you do want to share that, email it around, contact your town meeting members. Make sure you vote on May 7th and let those town meeting members know how you would like them to vote on Article 44.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for coming.